Welcome to the IUN Community Garden presentation, Engaging Youth in the Garden. My name is Leslie Kaiser. I'm a garden coordinator with CURE, and I'll be serving as a moderator. I'd like to introduce our presenter, Rebecca Cates. Rebecca is the Lake County Urban Agriculture Extension Educator through Purdue Extension. She works out of the Crown Point office. Rebecca graduated from Purdue University with degrees in wildlife and forestry and natural resources. She enjoys growing vegetables and food for pollinators in her own yard. Rebecca also enjoys helping people grow their own food and enjoy the outdoors. She can be reached at busser@purdue.edu. Rebecca, we're excited to have you. Anything you'd like to add?
Oh, this is great. Thank you so much, Leslie and Amanda. Excited to be talking about engaging youth in the garden. So here's my contact information. If you ever have any questions about gardening or farming or engaging youth in the garden, definitely feel free to reach out. Some things that we're going to be talking about today include the benefits of engaging youth in the garden, and then some example gardening resources that I recommend that I like to use in my own curricula working with youth. Some funding sources for school gardens or nonprofit gardens that engage youth. Example garden curricula that I kind of drafted for a garden camp program. So it's an example of what a garden curricula could look like if you're organizing some sort of garden programming with youth. And then lastly, we're going to walk through a paper towel gardening activity where we're going to be planting seeds in a paper towel that can then later be planted in the ground in our garden. So it's a great way to get you thinking about seed spacing, so the amount of space different seeds need in the garden, and also a great way to get planting before you can actually get planting in the garden. So for that activity, our participants will need paper towels. So just like your standard paper towel you would get from the store, the idea is that it's on a square foot system. So you're going to be able to cut off about a square foot of paper towel. You also need some sort of seeds. So I have some seeds today. You can use some stand-in seeds if you don't have seeds, just to kind of walk through the activity. And then also washable glue. So glue that you would use like with kids' crafts, things that will break down in the garden over time. So first, let's talk about why we would engage youth in the garden. So what are some benefits? Nutrition is definitely one of those benefits that maybe you wouldn't think about unless you're a nutrition educator. So community gardens and gardens where youth can access fruits and vegetables provide access to fresh food for the community. And studies have shown that community gardens and children eat healthier than non-gardening families. Gardening also motivates kids to eat and try more fruits and vegetables than kids that don't garden. And then studies have shown increased preference for fruits and vegetables by youth who garden and improved attitudes towards fruits and vegetables. There are also lots of mental health benefits to gardening. So being in natural places, like being in a garden, fosters recovery from mental fatigue, improves outlook and life satisfaction, helps us cope with and recover from stress, improves our ability to recover from illness and injury, restores concentration, and improves productivity. So all great things for general mental health and also for improving our academic success for our youth in our schools. And then also we see physical health benefits to gardening. It's a great exercise that kids can learn and then apply throughout their whole lives. So gardening promotes physical activity and gets kids active without actually realizing that they're getting active or exercising. Gardening can be considered a moderate to heavy intensity exercise depending on what you're doing in the garden, but it's also low impact if you do it that way. So it can be a lifelong activity for exercise. It motivates people to stay active for longer throughout their lives. It offers opportunities for people to walk, lift, carry, dig, plant, rake, and practice balance and dexterity. And also promotes an increased range of motion and develop hand-eye coordination. And lastly, we can also, as educators, connect the garden to science and other academic subjects. So whether you're gardening outdoors or indoors, or talking about things related to the garden, you can touch on core subjects related to plant life cycles and structure, soil structure and function, plant adaptation, weather, ecosystems, sustainability, and experimental design. So you can do all sorts of different experiments with plants indoors or outdoors. I've seen different activities where people will use different amounts of light or different kinds of light structures and see how that influences the plant growth. You can also test different kinds of potting mix or different kinds of watering patterns. There's all sorts of things that you can use experimental design with for the garden. And studies have shown that gardening with youth improves science achievement scores. Now I'll talk about some of my example resources that I recommend for educators working with youth in the garden. So whether you're a camp counselor, a teacher in a school, a scout leader, a homeschool parent, whatever, if you're working with youth in the garden, these resources provide great activities and example lesson plans to engage youth about the garden in the classroom and then also out in the garden itself. So this whole first page of resources is Junior Master Gardener, which is a nationwide program that started with Texas A&M, but is across the state. Across the states. And so these provide different activities related to different topics in the garden. So the main ones we have the Junior Master Gardener Handbook, which is intended for the youth participants. So it has additional activities and different workbooks. So you could theoretically get one of these handbooks for each of the youth in the program. There's also a teacher leader guide, which has all of the basic activities that go along with the Junior Master Gardener curricula. So these are kind of the core materials if you are going to get into Junior Master Gardener. And these resources can be found at jmgkids.us, which is linked here on this page. And so you can purchase these books directly online. It'll take you to their bookstore. They also have trainings available either online or in person across the US. So we have some through Purdue Extension. I'm able to lead Junior Master Gardener trainings. If anybody wanted to have a workshop for Junior Master Gardener, I could provide that. And it's really just to do, it talks about the program. It talks about setting up a Junior Master Gardener club if you wanted to do that. And so that kind of keys you into some nationwide resources additional to the curricula, and also provides kind of a forum to communicate with different Junior Master Gardener groups across the US, which is pretty exciting. Yeah, but you don't need to go through the training. They do in order to get the curricula. They also have a YouTube channel and social media, which will provide different example demonstration activities so that if you are interested in an activity, and maybe you're more of a visual or hands-on learner rather than a book learner, it's really fun to watch people do the activities on the YouTube channel as well. Another book from the Junior Master Gardener series that I like is Literature in the Garden. So that's one of my favorites. It provides different books that go along with this curricula guide, and the different books are intended primarily for elementary age students, but definitely work well for all ages. I've heard of people using this curricula with high school as well. So all ages definitely. And the Literature in the Garden provide different activities that go along with the books. So it's pairing that reading component. So one of the core subjects that all of our youth in our schools need to learn, applying that to garden topics. There's also a wildlife gardener book that's all about providing habitat for wildlife and pollinators. And there's Learn, Grow, Eat, Go, which is a newer curricula guide that's all about nutrition. It also talks about gardening either in the classroom or also out in the garden, but it also provides that additional nutrition component as well. And these are all primarily for elementary age students, but definitely can be scaled up for older youth. And then the two guides on the far right here, Operation Water and Operation Thistle, are intended more for middle school level. So these are kind of the level 2 And they're kind of set in a detective kind of mystery format. So you're solving problems in the garden to save the garden from the evil Dr. Thistle, which is pretty fun. But again, all of these curricula can be scaled up or down depending on what grade group you're working with. And I do know that the Junior Master Gardener administration is working on creating a pre-K curricula as well for those younger youth. So lots of great resources there. I also added in these resources that I've seen people use and I recommend. So kidsgardening.org, littlegreenthumbs.org, National Ag in the Classroom, which you would think is all about farming, but definitely can be applied to a lot of gardening curricula as well. There's the Great Garden Detective Adventure, which is a pretty thorough curricula available through the USDA. And Purdue also has a garden curricula through 4-H. So if you go to the Edu store, which I have linked down here, you can type in garden curricula and you'll get that, or gardening and you'll get this. And it's a series of shorter guidebooks that you can purchase, whether or not you're a 4-H group, but if you're interested in becoming a 4-H club, you can definitely reach out to your local county extension office to find out more about that. But it goes from elementary school to high school. Next, I'll touch on some funding sources. So whether you're working as a nonprofit with youth or you're working as a school or a homeschool group, these are all funding sources that would apply for you. So Little Green Thumbs, as well as providing curricula, also provides funding sources, and it is a nationwide grant. So there's a nationwide grant application that does have a window. It's not open right now, so it's good to check in on the website to see when that's open. I couldn't find when the grants were typically available, but that would be something to follow up with them on their website. And so this is an in-kind grant, so they won't provide you money, but they will provide you garden equipment and also virtual support and access to a teacher portal. So which has different videos and ways to communicate with different teachers across the US about gardening. And so they have actually 2 grant programs right now. The Little Green Thumbs is their original one, which is intended for older elementary school up to 6th grade and is intended for larger garden projects that need a longer amount of time. And the Little Green Sprouts is a newer program for smaller gardens with younger kids that have a shorter amount of time frame. So maybe it's more microgreens and herbs and things like that. Next, I'd like to highlight the Purdue Extension Master Gardener Community Garden Grant Program, or Garden Grant Program. So this is good for, again, nonprofits, community gardens, school groups, community groups that are looking to do any kind of garden project. It's for Lake County residents only. And this, usually the grant period is late winter to early spring. So this last year it was open, I think, from early February to late March. And so it's for up to $500 for any kind of educational garden project. So you can reach out to learn more about that. And then the National Ag in the Classroom also has a grant program that awards $500 for all age groups for teachers with ag classroom projects, which can include projects related to school gardens and also an array of different topics as well. Some additional funding sources. The Home Depot has different in-kind donation programs available where you would write a letter, and this is for nonprofits specifically. You'd write a letter with the scope of your project and a wish list of what you need for your program and how much of that you need. And you would also have to provide proof of nonprofit status and deliver this letter and proof of nonprofit status to the Home Depot representative at the help desk at your local Home Depot. And so this is for small donations, so things like plant seeds, tomato cages, things like that. But for larger donations, you would do the same thing, but it would take a little longer and you would work with a local Home Depot rep to write a grant to corporate. So it does take a little bit longer for that to happen versus going straight from the store. Kids Gardening also has grant opportunities. They really are kind of a hub that they link different grant opportunities on their website more than having their own grant available. Growing Spaces has different grants available, just like Kids Gardening, but they also have their own grant where they provide this in-kind donation specifically for this type of greenhouse. It's almost more like a high tunnel that's kind of this dome shape that you see in their logo over here on the right. And they have worked with, there was a small farm in Chicago that they've worked with in different community gardens. So it's a nationwide program, and there is a grant window for that. And Seed Your Future also has various grants available. We'll move on to the example curricula. And I'd love some feedback from you all as well, because this is just a short example curricula for a YMCA that's going to be having a summer garden program. Well, they're having a summer camp, and then the garden is part of the camp program. So they'll probably be out in the garden once or twice a week, and also want some in-class gardening activities as well. So it's nice to have some things to do indoors to tie the gardening back to the core subjects, and also if it's maybe not such a nice weather day, so they can still be talking about gardening if they can't be in the garden. So I like to break up the garden curricula into different parts. So the first part is before planting, because planting itself can be a really big learning curve for students that don't have garden experience. So kind of preparing them for what that's going to be like. In the classroom, you can start by learning what plants need to survive, doing the know and show sombrero activity and lesson plan from the Junior Master Gardener curricula. So you see at the bottom left here, they make a sombrero out of newspaper, and they get to decorate it, and they get to do a show and tell about what plants need to survive. So that helps them keep in mind what they need to do and provide their plants in order for their garden to be successful. There's also the shake, rattle, roll activity, which this jar on the right is a picture from. And that's a great way to get, and that's also from Junior Master Gardener. And that's a great way to get you thinking about soil. So what you would do is you would take a soil sample from your garden. And I definitely like to have youth out in the garden playing with the soil before any planting is being done, because that's exciting in and of itself. So they can maybe be out in the garden, playing in the soil, preparing the soil, loosening it, getting it ready for planting, and then collect a sample of that soil and add some water to a jar, and then shake it, and then wait for things to kind of sort out. And you get these different layers of your soil and organic matter in the jar, which is really interesting to look at and make some scientific observations from. And in the Junior Master Gardener curricula, it'll also explain what all these different things are and how they apply in the garden. Some other things that you can be learning before planting would be plant families, especially if you're going to be doing some crop rotation and planning your garden before, and engaging the youth in planning the garden before planting it. So you can learn, you can group your different garden beds by plant family. So it's important to know what different plant families are, maybe turning that into some sort of game where they get to learn different plant families. Maybe they get to do a relay race or something like that. You can also be teaching them companion plants if that's something that you want to add into your garden. Part 2 is the planting and planning process. So getting more into the active gardening process. So in the classroom, they can be learning about plant spacing, like we're going to be doing later with our paper towel gardening activity, which these two worksheets are at the bottom left. You see the garden planting chart and an example snippet from the activity, which you see here is a paper towel square foot divided up into sections. And so that's teaching plant spacing. So they don't just put all the seeds into one clump in the garden and hope that it grows, hopefully. There's also the Home Sweet Home activity shown at the bottom right here that provides a worksheet for site assessment, but that's an easy way for kids to do a site assessment based on whether the site has sunlight, is near a water source, has well-drained soil, things like that. So that if you haven't built the beds or haven't actually put in your garden yet, you can have them help choose a site that's going to be the most ideal. Or even if your site's put in place, you can have them do the site assessment on that garden plot to see how good of a site it is, and maybe compare it with some other theoretical placements if you want to expand, or comparing it to a site that maybe wouldn't be so good, so they can see the difference between a good site and a not so great site for putting a garden in. And so both of these activities are from Junior Master Gardener. And then once you're in the garden, you can actually plant your paper towels that you made for the paper towel gardening activity and other seeds directly, and also plant. So thinking about teaching how planting a seed is different than planting a transplant that you would get from a garden center, or you would start seeds indoors. Maybe back at part 1, you can be starting seeds indoors. And then you can also use the vegetable planting guide that Purdue has to help teach them when to plant different crops, whether they be cool season or warm season, depending on how old your kiddos are, and how much garden information you want to throw at them. Learning how to read the back of a seed packet for more information is also a very helpful skill. So I have a picture of a typical seed packet where you would find, you can learn about grow zones or planting spacing or depth and things like that. So all great information for them to learn, and a skill that they can carry forward with them into adulthood. Are there any other activities that anybody else would add for planting and planning, or for before getting in the garden?
It looks like we have a question from Linda. She'd like to know the typical tools you would use in the garden.
That's a great question. So the typical tools that I've used with kiddos is, the number one thing would be gloves, especially since not every kid is going to want to get in the soil, especially if they haven't been in the garden before, or they've been taught to stay nice and clean and they don't like getting their hands dirty. Having gloves is probably the number one thing. Ideally, you have a watering hose on site, but if you don't, making sure you have some other water source. I've seen a garden that is going to have a rain barrel, but they don't yet. So each time we go out to the garden, they have to bring a couple of buckets of water, like a couple of 5-gallon buckets, and they bring some smaller watering cans for the kids. So I would say gloves and watering source is probably the most important things. But if you do have the funding for having a tool set for the kids, so if you can have like a hand trowel, rakes, things like that, that's always helpful. And then depending on if you have like a tool shed out at the site, you could have your full garden set out there. So you could be teaching the kids how to spread mulch, but with rakes and shovels and wheelbarrows and things like that. But I would say the number one things to get started would be the gloves and watering cans.
Linda also suggested going over bugs you can expect in the garden.
Definitely. That is a great one. So actually, Linda was spot on my next one. So part 3 for me is maintenance. And so after they plant, what do? You don't just stay inside and wait for harvest, right? There's lots of things to do out in the garden in between. So in the classroom, you can be learning how to identify different insects, beneficial insects, and also insect pests. And what's the difference? Because not all insects are pests, and actually most of them are beneficial. There's a Don't Bug Me activity and an Ordering Insects publication available through Junior Master Gardener. So you can work with the kids to use these visual activities to learn how to identify different insects, or at least get them close to an identification so they can understand what kind of insect it is and is it a pest. And then in the garden, they can apply what they learned from the classroom to then explore insect pests using the insect collection activity. So there's Suck-a-Bug, which is this picture on the right, where you can actually create these like bug catchers for smaller bugs, of course, where you have like a film canister or a pill container and some like tank tubing from a fish store, and definitely some gauze filters so that nobody is inhaling any bugs. But it's a fun, strange way for kids to get out in the garden and actually collecting bugs. And you can also talk about different bug mouth parts, because this kind of long tube structure could be similar to some bugs' mouth parts, which is fun. Or if you don't want to do that, you can definitely get some insect nets or the little bug catchers, things like that. so they can observe the bugs up close, maybe some magnifying glasses or microscopes if they're very small, especially if you get to the mites and aphids and things like that. You can also teach them how to identify different weeds. So you can see the Purdue Guide to Common Lawn and Garden Weeds publication, which is actually intended for master gardeners, but it's freely available online. So it has pictures of different weeds. And actually just before this program, Leslie and Amanda and I were talking about different plant ID sources. So I've used Seek, the iNaturalist app, which is great, but it doesn't seem to do too well with identifying plants when they're small that I've found. And Leslie and Amanda had mentioned the Picture This app. And so I don't know if it does only natives or it'll also do weeds, which can also be native, but that would be something to look into, or different field guides to bring in to teach kids how to use dichotomous keys and how to use field guides. That would be all really useful skills for them to have as they grow older. Are there any other activities or plant ID resources that you like for maintenance?
To clarify, Rebecca, Picture This is a database for all different kinds of plants, not just natives.
Great, thank you so much. And so lastly, part 4 for me is harvest, because the gardening education doesn't end after harvest. So in the classroom, you can be helping students learn when plants are ready to harvest, so you don't have people picking things before they're ready. By following the Junior Master Gardener Harvest Indicator web resource, which is available at their website. And so this is kind of the right side of the picture that I have here, the Kid Zone activity. And so it kind of quizzes you. You choose a vegetable and it'll show you a few pictures of that vegetable, and you click which one you think is ready to harvest. And then it'll tell you yes or no and why or why not. So it could be an individual kind of game for the kids to do on the computer or tablets, or something to do as a class or a group all together. There's also Food Link, which provides, it's a Purdue Extension resource that provides information on sometimes when things are ready to harvest, and also provides different recipe ideas and food preparation information. So that's really nifty. And there are QR codes, so you can print those out and actually put them in the garden, especially if you're working with a community garden where community members or older youth that have their own cell phones are going to be out in the garden. They can use the QR codes to learn more. Also, to go along with harvest, reading the back of seed packets will help you get an estimate for the number of days until harvest. So maybe you could be counting down in your class, but also understanding that those dates aren't perfect and can definitely vary based on the variety of that kind of plant that you have. And then you can also, once you harvest the produce, be teaching them about food safety and proper produce washing. Something important to keep in mind is that when we buy produce from the grocery store, a lot of times we don't think to wash the produce, even though it 100% does need to be washed. And so that's something to teach the kids, and also that they can be washing their own produce that they grew, which is really exciting. You can also do activities like taste tests and cooking demonstrations. And these are great ways to get kids to try new foods and encourage them to enjoy vegetables that maybe they haven't had before. And then lastly, you could also add in this food waste education component. Purdue Nature of Teaching, so purdue.edu/nature has some great food waste lesson plans that focus around the environmental effects of food waste, and also talks about things like composting and empowering youth to teach their peers about food waste. So lastly, I was going to lead the paper towel gardening activity from Junior Master Gardener. So this is kind of a quick one on the information. And this activity is, again, a great way to get kids thinking about plant spacing. And also, if you have a square foot gardening, it's a great way to kind of pair that information in. Thinking about plant spacing and how many plants go into a square foot. And it's a great way to get planting early in the year before you might be able to plant those plants. Like I worked with a youth group out of the church where we were doing paper towel gardening in February for plants that they didn't plant until now. So that's pretty exciting. So, and this is using the garden planting chart. So if anybody else is going to be following along with this activity, maybe take a picture of this slide or write down what plant you're using. So for example, I'm going to be doing, we'll say bush beans. So I'm doing 2 different kinds of beans. And so I'm going to plant 9 seeds per paper towel at about 1 inch depth once I get them in the garden. But for the sake of today, we're just going to plant them on the paper towel. So I'm going to need my seeds, my paper towel, and my glue, which is a washable glue like Elmer's glue for kids. So everybody had a chance to find out what their plant is, how many seeds per paper towel they need. And if it's not listed here, you definitely can find this information online if you look up how many square foot for different plants. Stop sharing so that you can all see what I'm doing. So I'm going to take a square foot of paper towel, which for this kind of paper towel is about 2 rectangles. Doesn't have to be perfect. This is a great way to teach fractions as well, because once you have your square foot of paper towel, you would then fold your paper towel into as many fractions as you need for that type of seed. And the smaller the seed is, typically the more fractions you have to fold into. So for example, I've done one with carrots. And so this is what the finished product looks like. And it's 16. So I had kids doing this to divide their paper towel into 16 groupings, and each of the fractions of paper towel has a carrot seed in it. So that's what that looks like when it's done. But for beans, they're a little bigger. They need a little bit more space. And so I'm going to need 9 spaces. So for that, I'm going to essentially fold it into thirds. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. So you can teach hamburger, hot dog style folding or whatever works for you. I'll also say as a tip, for younger kids, the bigger seeds are definitely easier for them to handle just from dexterity purposes. And so I folded my paper towel up. So I should have 9 spaces. And I do. 3, 6, 9. If it's hard to see, you can always have the kids use a pencil to draw it out, the lines. And so I'm going to do, I have Mardi Gras beans, which is just kind of a string bean. Pretty cool. And so I need 9 of them. And then I'm essentially just going to put a drop of glue in the middle of each of these paper towel spaces. So if you can all see what I'm doing, moving the beans out of the way, just going to put a drop of glue. And then going to stick the beans or whatever kind of seeds you have on the drop of glue. I like Mardi Gras beads because they are all different colors. And so then lastly, you're going to let them dry, usually overnight. And then you want to write the name of the seed that you use so that you remember. So I'm just going to write Mardi Gras beans for mine. And maybe you write the date that you plan to plant based on your planting calendar if you've been here for the rest of the series. So for these guys, I'm probably going to plant them this Sunday. Would be a good time to start planting beans, probably about as early as you could plant beans in our area. so that we avoid any frost issues. So you can write the date, and then you're going to put this somewhere that it can dry. But then once you have your finished product and it's all dry, apologize, my carrot one is a little dirty. It's ready to go. So once you have it and it's ready, it's all dry, you can plant it in the garden. And it's already spaced for you, so you don't have to teach the kids, how to do inches or measuring or things like that. Although that would be a great skill as well. I just have experienced that to be a little chaotic with younger kids especially. So this is an easy way to have everything spaced out. And you look up maybe on the seed packet or your plant growing chart to see how deep you're supposed to plant the seeds. And I will say that it's typically about the depth is typically about twice the width of the seed. So the smaller the seed is, typically the shallower you will plant it, and vice versa. So for the carrots, we really just need a light coating of soil. So I'll kind of just move soil to the side, put this down, and cover it back up and water it. So that's essentially all you have to do, because eventually the paper towel and the glue will break down and you'll have your seeds. So that's essentially what it is. And I actually just did this last week with a group of kids, and you could theoretically, if you have a large enough group that really likes to do this activity, you could make your whole garden bed, plan it out using paper towels, and plant your seeds, and you essentially just are ready to go when you get in the garden. Just lay them all out, and planting is easy and done. But if you don't do the paper towel, you can still go out and either teach the measuring for plant spacing, or if you just do a row, you can then teach them about plant thinning. So that's another option as well. That's the activity for paper towel gardening from the Junior Master Gardener curricula. And also encourage you all to follow your county extension offices on social media and on their websites. I'm the Lake County Extension Educator for Ag, so you can find Purdue Extension Lake County on Facebook to find us.